Legendary. Welcome back. You're back from your travels. How are you doing?
GM. I just got back like 2 hours ago after a 10-hour flight flying back from Minneapolis, home in Europe. And I'm in this very interesting state of being like very energetic after the conference, very, pumped, excited on the one hand. And on the other hand, obviously being, tired after long flight, a very intense week full of meetups, conference talks, side events, partying. So it's a very interesting state to be in, that you're like, so full of energy, but actually you just could fall asleep instantaneously, kind of.
Yeah, that's quite contradictory, but
Yeah.
I kind of know what you mean.
So my plan is, to go to sleep later and get rid of being tired and stay with being energetic.
Are you jet lagged already? Or because when you went there, your jet lag was horrific, right?
Yeah, and typically I don't have like, issues with jet lag, and this time it was really bad. Like I was getting up at 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. almost every morning, and I mean on the plus side, I was able to head to the gym pretty early, but I would have, liked to sleep a bit more. But the energy and the positivity at VeeCon was so good that that was enough to boost my energy level and keep me going.
How was it possible that your friend was literally in the room next door to you? Was that planned?
No, I mean we did so Top Notch and I, we did, we've been talking on Discord for like more than a year, and of course we planned for meeting at VeeCon and going to the same hotel, but we did not plan for having the room next door, which was
How did you find out that you were in the room next door to each other?
well, basically, he arrived before me, and I was like, bro, what's your room number? And he was like, oh, it's 1402. And I'm like, you're kidding? I'm in 1403. It was a pretty fun thing that happened. I mean, on the other hand, it also allowed for us, to be real degens. And as soon as we, both woke up and had a bit of time before the conference, to hang out together and play Wolf Game or do other degen things together.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it really was.
That's funny. So, well, hey, that's really cool to meet people who you know and have been communicating with for a long period of time beforehand. Because as we've spoken about before, and one of the reasons why we started this was because we met in real life, and after communicating not in real life first, and it was cool, and it's nice when you sort of get the confirmation that the person that you've been speaking to, that you do actually get on with in real life, because it would be quite disappointing. I don't know what it would feel like. What would it feel like breaking up with someone? If you didn't like the person after you've liked the person online for months? I don't know if there's an equivalent emotion to feel.
Yeah, probably it would feel a bit like, I don't know, breaking up, losing a friend. It actually reminded me.
Or is it like the catfishing thing when people show certain profiles?
Yeah,
and
kind
you
of.
think they're really nice, and then they turn out to be not what you expect.
Yeah, it actually reminded me a bit of Love Is Blind. Like, I don't know, like I typically don't watch the, reality TV, but somehow started watching Love Is Blind, and those people dating and hanging out in the pods, talking to each other without actually seeing each other, and then seeing each other for the first time. It's basically what we did on Discord. So it's Love Is Blind NFT edition.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm sure I've seen loads of people talk about how there should be some sort of Web3 dating, either app or NFT or site, something like this. But I don't know. I haven't seen anyone do it yet. Have you seen anything?
I've seen a couple of mock-ups, but I think it was just a joke on Twitter, where basically, we're able to connect your wallet, and instead of swiping through someone else's pictures, you would swipe through their NFTs to their apes, cool cats, and whatever they were holding. and match someone that, shares the same communities and net worth as you do. But I think that was more of a joke and not a serious product in development. But I wouldn't be surprised either if we, would see a Web3 dating app at one point in time.
I mean, it sounds really crass because when you look at the assets, because it's so blatant, because it's so amplified, the wealth that people have via their wallets and their assets, and because they're literally called wallets, and they're literally called assets, it sounds really crude to do something like that. But in a sense, dating apps and photos and the things that you choose to display in them, in many ways might be indicative of very similar things, right? Like people obviously display their wealth, and it would be fairly easy to see who has a certain amount of wealth in some photos and in their profiles, as opposed to people who have less. So it might not be as a stupid idea as it sounds.
Yeah, I remember actually before NFTs, when I was working in fintech, jokingly talking about the idea of creating a dating app where basically can, share your stock portfolio and being matched with individuals that have a stock portfolio that, complements well with yours and adds to diversification and then also leads to decreasing the overall portfolio risk and be a financially very suitable match. And this could be something like that, but that's, again, very, very teaching.
So what if your wallet was full of aggressively gaming and land farming and gaming stuff? You'd need some sort of
art blocks collector,
high quality art
to match with you.
To set it up. Yeah, it's not a bad idea. That's quite funny.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure someone should build it and then just see if it gets any traction. It's not. I don't think it's as stupid idea as it sounds. I think it'd be quite fun.
It would be fun, yeah. But I'm not convinced if this would be the best approach to dating.
No, that's a fair point. So away from dating, what you're back from VeeCon, obviously. I don't even know if we mentioned that, but we mentioned it last week. You went to VeeCon. You've been looking forward to it for quite a while.
Yeah.
How was it? What was the energy like? It looked very exciting.
The energy was pretty amazing, and it was interesting for me to see, just how many people Gary Vee got into NFTs by talking about them, by educating them, and by creating the VeeFriends community. Because I didn't realize that to the actual extent, because I had, NFC Lisbon in my mind, where people came from all kinds of different backgrounds and NFT communities and, interest in Web3 and crypto. And obviously, VeeCon being heavily focused on the VeeFriends community had so many people that just got into this because of Gary Vee and because of VeeFriends. And they were very, very energetic about that. And, people were lining up for hours to get a chance to take a selfie with Gary Vee, to, exchange a couple of words with him. And, to the man's credit, he took I think 10 hours out of his weekend to be available to, stand in a selfie booth and talk to people, sign things, take pictures, etc. Same happened at the merch lines, where people also lined up to get the hoodies, shirts, and everything. But the overall energy was pretty amazing, and especially considering, the overall timing of the VeeCon happening in the bear market. And this was one of my thoughts. I was how will this impact the energy at VeeCon? Will people acknowledge that there's a bear market? Is this just a taboo topic that we just don't talk about? Or, how will we deal with that? And it was approached quite openly. Very, very many people talked about it, addressed or referenced it in their talks on stage as well. And this was, actually a very positive thing. And in retrospect, I think it is a perfect timing for a conference like this, because it is very reassuring to see all the people that went to the conference, as visitors, collectors on the one hand, but also all the projects, builders, project leaders, community managers who are still there, who are still building, and who are committed to build throughout a bear market and are not giving up because the market conditions are stressful right now. Because for me personally, I've been like, in crypto for such a long time that I know I don't feel like anything anymore when I see that kind of volatility. But I remember how it was when I was, rather new to this space, and it was super stressful to look at the portfolio and see 20% up and down in a single day. And this is what I was very curious to figure out. And it was like a super positive and reassuring feeling to see that everyone's still there, still building, energetic. Yes, we acknowledge the bear market, but no, it does not stop anyone from building and working on their own stuff.
That's interesting, especially because you said that most, or at least a lot of these people have come in new to the space. So it might be reasonable to assume that many of them are new to crypto as well, and therefore such a sudden dip in portfolios would feel quite meaningful to them. But in spite of that, it sounds like the energy was still super positive.
And I also think it's due to the fact that, Gary Vee kept reiterating how early we are in this space and how early we're in Web3. And, this is something we say like on Twitter all the time. And you see we are still early posts on our timeline, at every hour of the day, basically. But he made an interesting point that I didn't look at it before, which was Gary Vee saying, now we are early in Web3, that's true, but we're going to be the first in Web4, whatever that might be. Because the people who were like, first in Web2, investing in social media and being around then, they had, gathered all the experience of how Web2 evolved and had the perfect chance to be one of the first people to get into Web3. And I feel that this is the point that Gary Vee was trying to make, that, now seeing Web3 being built over the next couple of years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever. And this will at one step evolve into Web4 beyond the concept of ownership that we see in Web3, whatever Web4 might be. We have an amazing chance to be the first ones to spot that. And this, really helped to adding to the perspective of not only being early to Web3, but also being super early to like all the future evolution steps that will happen from here.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a point to be made about looking forward, and it's sort of how I think about when, with technology, if you have one iPhone and you're just like, oh, I really like this iPhone, I'm just going to keep it, I'm not going to upgrade. And then the next one comes out and you think, oh no, mine's still good, I don't want to upgrade. But if you keep doing that, you get so far behind in the technological development that when you do need to upgrade, you really struggle with the thing that you've upgraded to, because the gap between, even though the gaps are incremental in the iPhone's development, if you miss 7 of the gaps, those incremental gaps actually add up to something. So I can see how, participating participating fully in Web3 means that whatever comes next, it makes that next step easier for us to take, whenever that will be. I don't know when that will be. But one of the reservations I had about that, just whilst you were speaking, was, do you think there's a chance that the people who get very entrenched in building the platforms and protocols in Web3 miss the next step because they believe in the current step so much? And I've seen that a little bit with a number of kind of legacy Web2 companies like Google, who have been very resistant, or certainly from what I'd heard, been quite resistant to Web3, saying, oh, there's no need for the blockchain, there's no need for this, there's no need for that, everything's working fine as it is. Is there a chance that when you get into something and it becomes very profitable to you, you actually don't want things to change, you don't want it to get disrupted, because the world is pretty good and profitable for you as it is? And I think with Meta, or formerly Facebook, they're trying to get in relatively late now, right?
Yeah, they are. I mean, I don't know, how long they've been planning on getting in, but to the public face, it appears to be very late. But they are making a massive push because I think they realize how big the business opportunity is for them. And what you address is a very, very fair point and a very serious concern. But I think adding to that, you can be fully aware that Web 2 had, the Web 2 giants that were a bit reluctant to move into Web 3 when that paradigm shift started to happen. And if you're aware of that Web 3 is not, the last step of internet's evolution, and you see something new coming and evolving, and you just keep an open mind to try that, and not only maybe keep an open mind, but also try to allocate a part of your assets, a small part very early, to experiment with the new technology that, whatever it will be that might come up. I think it is a mindset that you have to be very conscious about. And this is why I also felt like it is important to think about, Web3 is fascinating, is amazing, is exciting to be there as we see it being built out, but also like to keep thinking what's going to be next, because if you don't do that, I think that exactly what you just said will happen, that you will, get stuck in your Web3 mindset, accept that as a status quo, and probably be a bit reluctant to adopt to new things.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely...
And it reminds me a bit of, people being like Bitcoin maxis, right?
Exactly.
Who even are reluctant to get into Ethereum. Yeah. And now, I look at people who lost a lot of money in Terra, Luna, and we talked about that as well in our podcast, right? And I hear some of these people saying, now I'm going to turn into a Bitcoin and Ethereum maxi because I don't want to experiment with something new. And this is why they say I get the people who, just stay with either Bitcoin and Ethereum. And while I understand that, on an emotional level, I feel like it's not the right consequence to draw, because you always should be, try to keep an open mind and experiment with new stuff, and, just look at new protocols, blockchains, technologies, ideas with an open mind, and just give them a chance to say, I might be interested to explore that, and not be like, nope, this is not OG, this is not Bitcoin or ETH, this is not Web3, I'm not going to do that, right?
Yeah, that's true. Was there anything at the conference that you did find interesting from that perspective? Like, oh, this is cool, I didn't know that this was happening, or I was excited to have found out about that?
Yeah, actually, it was in Keith Grossman's talk, being the president of Time, who, is pretty engaged in Web3 and pretty committed. And of course, we've seen the timepieces that they've been working on. But, hearing him speak and talking about basically the Time as a media company doing Web3 puts them in a very unique position, because it enables other companies who are maybe moving at a slower pace, who have regulatory issues, who have governance issues, who have issues with compliance, and would like to go, to get into Web3, but they can't for those reasons. They can cooperate with a media company like Time and have them facilitate their entry into Web3. And this was interesting to think about that from a media company's perspective, because, media companies have been struggling with the way they generate revenue and just relying on ads and advertorials and people, using more and more ad blockers, then media companies moving to premium subscriptions, which isn't a sustainable model, actually, right? And now that we can see media companies who are open to Web3 and open to that kind of innovation becoming a facilitator of that innovation, and fostering the entry of other companies into the space, and doing that in a way that's beneficial to them, opens like a whole new business model to media companies. And this is, I find this pretty interesting, because we are building our media company, and I didn't think about that role of a modern media company that is helping other companies that have these challenges to enter Web3 and to help foster innovation for companies outside of the space.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think there's two 2 points for me to make there. The first is, I think it's natural for any company that is successful in anything to then be able to educate others on the process to success. So, for example, I was having some conversations with some people yesterday, and you know how we together are building Airdrop Szn, and that's a very particular niche product, which, you know, we're learning all sorts of stuff about the delivery of a product, how to market things, how to sort the smart contracts out, how to do the Discord. Like, this is all stuff going on in the background as part of leading a project, and it's not necessarily super complicated, but it's all quite niche specific knowledge, and there are particular decisions which we need to take which will have consequences. So it's all very, very useful experience. I think what happens, and then maybe this is what time we're speaking to, was that, you know, once you manage to deliver on that, say you manage to do it well, then okay, not only do you have your product, which is Airdrop Szn, which has its own customers, but there's a derivative product, which is, if you need help managing to achieve what we've done, we can talk you through the process on a consultancy basis, right? Because I think the people who do well in this space, people will just immediately look towards them to be like, look, we have no idea how to navigate these things. Are you able to help us? So I think that's one of the first big points, which I completely agree with. Like, one of the roles, not just a media company, I think, is just, if you do well in this space, that avenue becomes open to you. And then the second one is, I have a friend who works at Lens Protocol, is working on Lens. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
So I think this is what you mean, right? About like for Web3 media companies, how can we think about things differently because the previous models aren't necessarily working? And he sent me over some documents, which I think, I don't know, it might be useful for us to look at, because I can't quite conceptualize it at the moment because it sounds so different to what already exists. Have you had much experience like looking at it?
A little. I would like to get more to it, but didn't have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, it looks interesting. It was something like you mint your profile. You mint your profile as an NFT or something, and then I didn't really understand. It's like you own your content, and then other people, like it's built into Polygon though. So I guess the way that it will work is that you will somehow be able to monetize direct to your consumer. So which then obviously skips out the ad-based model that was previously work. It might skip out a subscription-based model.
Yeah,
I don't know exactly, but it looked interesting because I think it's been designed entirely from the ground up with Web3 in mind. So I'm going to take a look at that a bit more.
Yeah, and you know, this idea of monetizing ownership like can happen on so many layers. And another example that I can think of at VeeCon was the quarter machine, which was basically
you told me about this.
Very, very decent quarter machine where instead of throwing in a quarter, you throw in a quarter of an ETH, and you get a random NFT out of a certain pool of NFTs. But which is technically very fascinating how they did that. But what I'm actually, trying to speak to is what they're doing in the background is they're building their own, or they have a full-fledged animation studio, and they're running their web series and shows. And when you have one of the characters that is on the show, you will, be paid for your character's airtime. And I like the idea of that. And I think, the evolution of that, if we, further think along this line, is the SBTs, the soulbound tokens that Vitalik has been talking about, which basically are tokens that are bound to your wallet and cannot be transferred and cannot be moved, which, can be something like your university degree or a diploma, but it also can be constitute a membership in a DAO and get rid of some of the problems that we currently see, because, most DAOs revolve around owning a certain ERC20 or owning an NFT, which allows for whale games who, could accumulate as many tokens as they wanted. But if there's one vote limited to your soulbound token, this is changing the game of that. And this is also an interesting topic that I would like, to explore a bit more, because it's a concept that I've, read a couple of times, seen a couple of threads on it, and thought about it a bit. Because on the other hand, if governments get into that and they can, send you their soulbound tokens, which, I don't know, could flag you as having done something that wasn't law abiding, or haven't paid your taxes or whatever, this would also be like, forever in your wallet. So it's interesting to think about that concept. But I think we should have a completely, an episode completely dedicated to this topic, because otherwise it's just going to be too much to condense into one talk today.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I haven't read a huge amount about it, but even just saying the word soulbound
reminds me of gaming. Yeah.
Reminds me of like Harry Potter, something magical, or maybe something there's a bit of sorcery going on, something which I'm not quite comfortable with.
Yeah. And this is exactly the point, that we were addressing before. It is something new. It has many, many implications that are difficult to understand. And I think, the important learning here is that we, explore it, look at it, try to see the good and the bad in it, not be like, this sounds scary, I'm rather not going to look at it. And this is, the mindset. And this was actually something I was talking about with my girlfriend a couple of weeks ago, that this curious mindset that I like to think that I have is something I would really, really love to keep my entire life. And I'm not sure if I can do that, because I don't know how it's, growing up being old, but I hope that I can.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's partly why we're in the space, right? Because everything is constantly evolving, and we can keep thinking about new, interesting problems. So with this quarter machine, did you actually put a quarter of anything? That's the real question.
I did.
Did you?
I did. Of course I did.
No, you didn't.
I did.
Did you?
Yeah. I pulled
what did you get?
A quarter machine. I pulled their own collection, which is called Floor is Lava. And this is actually the characters that I talked about that are going to be part of their show, and can, that I can monetize on their ownership. I think they also had like
Amazing.
Cool Cats, Clonax as a couple of the highlights in there. But I was like, I have to do that. I mean, there's not like many people that I could talk about in real life that I put like $500 in a quarter machine, but I have to do the degen spin.
That's amazing. That's cool. Yeah, I don't know. Even the logistics of it must have been quite difficult, right? How did they allow you to mint?
Yeah. So that was actually quite interesting. So basically, you were, they had a custom VPN network, as far as I could tell. And it would pull up, when you used the machine, it would pull up a QR code, and you had to send 0.25 ETH to that. And in return, they would pick a random NFT out of their pool and send that to your wallet. So it wasn't like interacting with a mint contract. It was a simple transaction where you send the money to. And then I also asked, okay, but what do you guys do if people, figure out the quarter machine vault, so to speak, and just start sending trash NFTs to there to lower, anyone's chance who's participating in that? And they were like, they also basically hard coded, I think, all NFTs that are eligible for, being airdropped to the participants. And basically, you can send whatever you wanted to send to the quarter machine, but that wouldn't impact the outcome of the draws at all.
That's smart. Wonder how much ETH was sent in the quarter machine over the course of the weekend.
I don't know. I think it was roughly around 600 NFTs in there. So 150 ETH then. But there was always a line there. You had to line up to do that spin.
That's cool. Well, it sounds like it was really busy. Well, everything was really, really busy. What were some of the other highlights for you? Or what were your key takeaways?
Mm, Another key takeaway was actually on the last day. It was on the main stage when Snoop Dogg, his son, um, their business associate, and Gary Vee were speaking. And Snoop Dogg had, and I posted on Twitter like his custom merch built around his ape, Dr. Bombay, how he calls him. And, he was like, you have this very, very, gonna put in my own words from Snoop's, you have this very valuable, NFT sitting in your wallet doing nothing. And it's a missed opportunity because it isn't actually an asset that could be a productive asset that you could put to work. Create your merch around it, create memes around it, create content around your PFP. And Snoop was like, try to explore avenues with the NFTs in your wallet or with the, NFTs that you really care about and create something around them that no one did before because they are valuable. You have that emotional attachment to them and you can do so much more than just using them as your Discord and Twitter PFP. And I really, like the thought of that because of course, we have a couple of apes in particular who have built a character based on the ape and just use that as the Twitter profile. But this, very interesting avenue to explore, but it has been done before. And building on that and trying to, maybe come up with a business idea that focuses on your NFT as the main character or come up with, I don't know, whatever it could be, right? And it's basically like, you have an asset that could be productive that you could use. By using it, you would also increase probably the brand's, awareness overall, increase the value of your asset because you would put it into a productive context. And it starts to be very, very interesting because I feel like, in this age and time, it's like so many people are focused on building their own me brand and branding themselves and building, their own reputation, and particularly in this space. And now you have another layer added to that game where you can build the reputation and brand around your PFP, but you can also, venture into further avenues and maybe even run an entire business that's built on your favorite NFTs, or bring a couple of them together and create, a show or content that matches them somehow. And I like this, this creative spark that encompassed this idea.
What do you think stops people from doing that then? Because I think people my instinct is that people are currently not willing to take that route because A, it is too difficult, it's hard work, and B, they're not really seeing the productive nature of the asset and they see it more as something which they want to buy and sell, like a static asset whose value, as a capital appreciating asset, as opposed to like, okay, I'm going to get rent off it or like use it to accrue value in a different way. It's more just like press buy and press sell.
I mean, you're raising two main points, right? One being it is a lot of work, and the other is if the asset is appreciating either way, why would I do that? Put in, that amount of work. But with that being said, I also think that a community like Bored Apes really will manage to flourish in that way because so many people, who have an ape are contributing and are building their own, brands and characters and stories around their own apes. So if, you have a community where the builders actually try to foster that creativity and try to foster that character building inside their community, I think that could, massively help improve with the overall brand's awareness and create like this, very, very positive cycle of value creation, awareness, strength of community. And this is a very very interesting concept.
I just had an idea. I think one of the things which is drawing people or preventing people from participating in this way is because they think that their commercial rights has and the identity or character which they create is tied to them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think that it's tied to you as an individual, that becomes like a thing around your neck. And it weighs you down because you start to think, well, my reputation is tied to the reputation of my asset, or my character is in some way needs to be reflected in this character. And then you somehow become soul bound.
Yeah.
Whereas I think what would be cool, or what maybe, or potentially what might be possible and might make people more free to experiment a bit more, is if you have these characters and you set them free from you, in the sense that,
mm-hmm.
You have people storyboard, whether it's you or other people, storyboard, the character arc of this person distinct from you, make them a completely different person with completely different characteristics, with different personality, make them the person that you wish you were instead of the person that you are, or the person that you would hate to be, just as an exercise of creating a character. And in that way, maybe you feel slightly freer to experiment because it's not a actual representation of you.
I love the idea, and a friend of mine is doing something pretty similar, who basically runs 2 Twitter accounts based on 2 PFPs of his, who have both their unique style in how they express themselves, what they are interested in, what they comment on. And it's super fascinating if because I happen to know that person in real life, if you know the guy in real life and you see, how he expresses himself via these 2 Twitter accounts, it is fascinating. But also adding to your point, if you transfer all the commercial rights to your community, and we haven't seen, there's like a certain risk, and we haven't seen that play out yet, I think. If you have one, bad actor who has, let's say, a Bored Ape, and he creates a massive Ponzi scheme around that ape's character and builds, this massive Ponzi scheme, and scams, I don't know, thousands of people, let's assume that. And this is then tied to the Bored Ape, to this particular Bored Ape. But this also could potentially, negatively reflect on the entire Bored Ape Yacht Club community. So there is like a certain risk if you, distribute the commercial rights equally to the entire community. Because if the community isn't strong enough, one bad actor could be enough to massively impact the overall reputation of that project in a negative way. And
yeah, definitely, this is something which the space has not thought about at all, and I think that they refuse to think about it because, well, it's kind of short-sightedness. If you speak to any lawyer, most of them will, and I have spoken to certain lawyers about the way that these commercial license agreements have been drafted, and the traditional ones at least will say that these are just complete nonsense. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Interesting.
Well, it certainly doesn't make any sense to be drafting these things in the way that they are. If you care about your brand and your copyright and your trademarks and whatever, like, it's to turn all the stuff away to anyone without really much there to constrain people. I've spoken to some law firms in London who've said that the stuff as it's currently drafted from particularly prominent projects are just not very strong. But as you say, like, it's a community and ultimately it's a business decision. The looser you are with the wording now, the more fun people can maybe have for a while, and you take the risk that bad actors might have an opportunity to do something where they wouldn't if you had drafted something a bit more.
Yeah, and I'm a massive fan, don't get me wrong on that one. I'm a massive fan of decentralization. I love seeing, people getting all the rights to their PFP and NFTs. But the only thing that I'm concerned with is if there can't be a way where we also put like certain checks and balances in place that allow to counteract some of that risk and maybe create a better protection of the overall community, or if it's just going to be something where the market is going to magically solve the problem by itself if there is no regulation. It can act freely. I don't know, but I feel like in the early stage, just one more thought on that. I feel like in the early stage that protection might be a very good idea, because we see a very similar approach with DAOs who, in their early stage say that they're going to keep a veto right to say no to certain decisions, that they're going to keep a minimum involvement in terms of their own, share of voice that they can put into the DAO, that they're going to keep the right to implement some very, very high level proposals in the beginning themselves until, a fully decentralized and democratized DAO is established, and then they can feel confident enough to take a step back. In a similar way, when protocols do their airdrops retroactively, they do that when they think that they reached a certain kind of maturity of the protocol, when they say, okay, now we can put the governance in the hands of our community because we have a community that's strong enough to do that.
Yeah, I think the issue with it's a fine line, and the problem with the idea is that people say two things at the same time. And I know because I've worked with a project, and I've the general sentiment in the space is that, oh yeah, like we do want to give the community everything that they want. Oh, but however, we do want to stop these things. And you can say both things, but when it comes to writing it down in a document, you need to make a decision what the thing is. And if you want the protection, then you have to write things down which take some of the rights. And this is the difficulty in all governance, right? You have to make a call. And I think what is happening at the moment is either people are drafting it very loosely and therefore giving up their own some of their own strength for the community's sake, or alternatively they're drafting it strongly but just saying something else so that the community is appeased and feel like they do have more rights than they may have actually written in
that's a very interesting point that you're making. And actually Gary Vee did speak to a different aspect of this conflict of voice that you just mentioned, with the community calling for decentralization, calling for deregulation, only up to the moment when they fall for a scam. Then everyone wants regulators step in, law enforcement step in and help them get their funds back. So it's still an ongoing process where we, I think, try to figure out what amount of decentralization works with what amount of, let's call it, protection or rules matches together in a way that just makes sense going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a work in progress, but at the same time, I have the strong suspicion that people are throwing out, this is my view with DAOs in general, I think people are throwing out all sorts of good law and good development over time of sort of corporate governance and all this stuff. People are just throwing out and starting again, and then they're starting to say, oh, well, this is a work in progress. It's like, well, no wonder it's a work in progress. It's because you've thrown out every single good thing that's developed over time in order to get to the position that we're in. And not saying that that position was perfect, because it isn't. Nothing is perfect, but the current organizational structure of a Fortune 500 company has developed over hundreds of years. Maybe not the specific company, but the law and the protections behind it has developed over time to get you into this position. And throwing it all away and experimenting again, I find, well, it's interesting, but I can certainly see why it's a work in progress, because it's a bit more revolutionary to me than evolutionary.
Yeah, Yeah, that's a good way to point it. And also, going back to the start of our conversation, talking about the role of media companies specifically, but also like companies in general that are in the Web3 space, and why it is important, to keep an open mind to onboarding Web2 companies, traditional companies that genuinely want to interact with this space, right? And not just there to make a quick buck and then leave the space again, because they have, made their experiences in traditional governance, policy making, legal environments, and whatnot. And this experience is valuable. It might not be able to you might not be able to translate it one to one to the Web3 space, but it's experience and learnings that we can build on, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's there's a lot of experience right now which will be super valuable to the people coming. Was there anything else you wanted to speak about VeeCon? I thought you said there were two main takeaways you had. I think we spoke about one, or maybe we did speak about both.
I did speak to both, because like the first one was Web 4, the Web 4 thing, putting that into perspective of how early we are, and the second one was using your NFTs productively.
I see. Well, that's cool. What about the kind of behind the scenes stuff? There was that, because I know we've been in a stage now of our production where we have the product in mind. We've written our one pages.
Yeah.
We know what we want to do. And when we were speaking the other day, we were discussing, okay, well, what's our main challenge as it currently stands? And we do not believe that the challenge is the product, in a sense, because what I think we're doing differently to other people is that we're not selling a community, we're not selling a dream. I don't think we're selling a particular niche information product.
Yeah.
A course as such, but it's kind of to be part of a cohort with a particular set of information to be provided to you.
Mm-hmm.
So the product, I believe, is fairly niche. It's fairly strong. The question is, we need to deal with reach and marketing and interest and making sure that people, and awareness, and making sure that people are aware of the product. So that's something we've both been working on. And I was actually thinking about this earlier. I was thinking, what percentage of my time now should be going towards awareness? Like just messaging people who I think would be interested, engaging with people on Twitter and Discord who also I think would be interested. And in my head, I think I got as high as like 50 to 75% of my time should be that now, because if that's the issue that we face, then maybe that's the proportion of time I should be spending on it. Because the product, I think, it's not going to take care of itself, literally. As in, there's other things that we're building. We're doing Discord. We're sorting the site out. We're talking to the devs, etc., etc. But all of that will be, it will pale into insignificance if there's no one to. Well, that's not true. The product is still very, very important.
Yeah. To
get it in place properly, but having the awareness out there is obviously very important too. So how have you approached that from a personal level?
Mm-hmm. So I fully agree with you that, awareness and being able to communicate your products, whatever that might be, value proposition, like why do you actually solve a problem with what you're building, is very, very important. And I think this is something we have figured out for Airdrop Szn. And it's something that, is easy to speak to. And speaking about that at VeeCon, because, you get into so many conversations with so many people. And at one point you get to the question, so what do you do in this space? Do you collect? Do you flip? Do you trade? Do you build something yourself? And I had the impression that, people got our product, got the idea of Airdrop Szn. But as you said, reaching out to people and getting that awareness is super, super important, but it's also difficult to scale. Like there's, if
this
you
is the thing I'm finding.
if you use like 75% of your time, then you're going to reach out to a lot of people and talk to a lot of people about that. But you're still mostly only gonna talk on a one-to-one basis to people about that. Like, obviously, if we talk about it in our podcast, or if we were to talk about it on, other podcasts or whatever, we would reach a broader audience. But then on the other hand, we wouldn't get like, the direct feedback, which is often so, so valuable that you get in a personal conversation. So for example, I was talking to a dev and, about building a smart contract and everything for Airdrop Szn. And, he had the idea of maybe we could allocate a certain amount of the, of the funds that we collect minting to kind of either DAO or, which is very complex in regulatory terms, but still just the idea, either a DAO or kind of a, Airdrop Szn official trading account that people could follow to see in what protocols, layer 2 solutions, airdrop strategies we take interest in, right? And you don't really get that kind of feedback. And when you don't talk to people on a one-to-one basis and you don't get their actual reaction, it's again different if you talk to them, via Twitter, Discord, or if you're on a call with them or talk directly to them at a conference. So while I think, yes, the downside is you cannot scale it, it is still super, super valuable in the early stage to collect as much feedback as you can possibly do.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. The issue is scaling, but the most enjoyable and potentially useful conversations seem to always be done one-on-one. And I guess that's an interesting reflection, given that this is, I guess, the first product. I don't know if you've done this type of stuff before, but it's the first product that I have kind of personally taken to the market as such. I've actually done a few other small things, but from a background where traditionally always employed and providing a service, and always having people who are more senior to you doing the customer relations, right, or the client relationships. There's always that someone above you to do it. So it's been really cool to reach out to people, being the person with it on, it's on our shoulders now. And I found it really fun to talk to people and gauge the feedback and gauge the interest and see what they've had to say. What's the feedback generally been like for you?
Yeah, before I answer that, I also agree with that because it's so fascinating, because you get to, holistically work on a product and work on all parts of it, on building the product, on the security side of it, on the, regulatory side of it, and obviously massively thankful, for your legal experience on building that product, right? So it is a very amazing experience to get. And I think it's also like very, very helpful to figure out once more where your strengths are in this space and where you need help, and gets you a very good idea of how you would go forward when building a team.
It's funny though, because I mean, I definitely think, we're going to learn so much about ourselves in the process, and where we would, like in an ideal world, what we would prefer to specialize in and what we would prefer for someone else to do. But I do think that for this particular product, and maybe others as well, like who would we be able to push the marketing to, for example? Like people, even if we were to push the marketing to someone else, we'd need to convince them that you can be safe in marketing us, because we are particular types of people, and especially when you go one-to-one, people want to know, like, people always talk about betting people. People want to know, like, you are the person. I've had my 30-minute conversation with you. I feel fairly confident in you. But if you push that to someone else who's an employee, I think Gary Vee's spoken about it before. Ages. I saw this in one of his content ages and ages ago, where it was like, don't expect your employees to work as hard as you, or care about your product as much as you, or like really try as much as you, because it's not their product. Like, you're paying them the thing. it's unfair to expect them to work with as much passion as you for your own product.
And particularly in Web3, where there is this culture of meeting your heroes, meeting the builders, meeting your artists, and people like that. And I love that. I just recently, discovered a new artist for me, a new artist on Known Origin, bought 2 of their works and immediately reached out to them on Twitter to talk about that, and got an answer and was super happy about having that kind of conversation. And, this level of connection, of being genuine, is so special and so valuable to Web3 that I agree that you're not able to push that to someone else. And going back to your initial question, what, the feedback was that I collected at VeeCon, it was very positive. And, when feedback is too positive, it concerns me, because it's easier to say, yeah, hey man, that's a great idea. Good luck working on that, bro, and move on. Right. So this is why I like,
that's true.
Leading up with, more challenging or more difficult question. And I'm like, so this is what I'm building. This is the idea of Airdrop Szn. What don't you like about it? To flip the script.
That's good. That's nice. That's really nice. Did that take people, like, how did people react to that?
They are a bit, surprised, because they're probably used to, positive kind of approach and question, but they start thinking. And I feel like this is where I, got very, very valuable feedback out of it. And one of that was being, talking to the dev, who said, well, he would like to be able to follow us in a transparent way, what we are actually doing, besides the guides and tutorials we're going to create. And another feedback was a person also saying, I like, the approach of the community around that, but I don't understand the entire scope of the product, right? Is it just, quote unquote, focused around the Arbitrum Odyssey campaign that we have been mentioning a couple of times already? Or is there going to be more to it? Does it stop after that? And another, and the very same person, added to that if we set a certain, scope of the product as being a certain campaign, a certain protocol, or a certain amount of time that we're building that for, that they would like to see something like, if we build a follow-up product, they would like to be able to burn their first NFT and get the follow-up product at at half the price or whatever. So I found this to be, very valuable, to flip the scripts and ask people what they don't like about the stuff that you're building.
I think that's a really, really smart thing to do. I didn't quite do that, but I did. I think that's actually really smart. But yeah, I kind of pushed people. I think someone, I literally said, like, I want you to criticize this. Like, tell me what is wrong with it. Like, I want your criticism. But yeah, I think it's really good to actually open with that question, because I think that would frame the discussion in the way that would be useful to people. Because you're right, people, we especially with people that we know, or maybe even more especially with people that we don't know, we're very, very inclined to just say, sounds cool.
Yeah, to encourage them, and right? To try to avoid a difficult conversation.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Okay, cool. Well, we're coming up to an hour, man. And we've got all sorts of other stuff to do. We'll be speaking tomorrow on more project-based stuff, but it was good to catch up. Glad to hear about all the stuff going on at VeeCon. And I think this feedback process is going pretty well. Let's keep pushing on with that.
Absolutely, I love it.
Cool, man.
All right.
We'll talk tomorrow.
Talk to you tomorrow.
Good to chat.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.